Hello to all my people, and if you're watching live, checking us out on YouTube, or listening on your favorite podcast provider, you are most definitely my people. Welcome to another episode of Botched Spots and Share Shots. I'm your host, a chef by trade and a mark by choice. I am the Will Gray, and joining me tonight, he is a world-class athlete. He is the top attraction across any territory. He is world-class Channing Thomas. Channing, thanks for coming on Chat About Some Wrestling, brother. How are you?
Oh my God. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. No one does it better than you, except for Sydney Bacabella, of course.
I try to set up at the top, and then it's just downhill from here, man. Everything after the intro, I can't take any responsibility from there.
Oh, that's great. Might as well end the interview now then.
That's it. Thanks for stopping by and listening, guys. No. The cool thing about this is I try to do everything. It's very regimented. We do them the same way, but everybody kind of adds their own spice and flair to it. I always start with the origin story.
Woo!
It's the early exposure to wrestling, what you watched. I grew up at the tail end of the NWA days, late 80s, early 90s, beginning at WCW. What about you? What did you grow up watching?
So I just turned 26 last week, or 2 weeks ago. So I started in like the early 2000s watching SmackDown on UPN every Thursday, and then eventually Friday night when it moved over. The earliest match I remember watching is I got a Judgment Day DVD, not Dom Mysterio Judgment Day, like the old school pay-per-view Judgment Day, and it was John Cena versus JBL in that like bloody I Quit match where they're just both bleeding like stuffed pigs. That's like my first exposure to wrestling. A lot of blood. It's great.
It's that ruthless aggression era, I feel like doesn't get the same roses as the attitude era does, but there's so many people that, like, I don't want to say the next generation behind me because, little bit. I started it, you guys are the end of it, but the effect the ruthless aggression era had is equal, in my opinion, to what the attitude era did for the kids in the 90s, for sure.
Oh yeah. It was like kind of like watching wrestling back then. I don't know if it was like frowned upon in schools. It was definitely like looked down upon, and it wasn't as popular as it was in like the Attitude Era. But people like kind of watched it in secret, except for me. I had like my wrestling figures on the bus. So,
for me, I when I say chef by trade and mark by choice, that's more than a gimmick. I was an executive chef for 20 years before I got into journalism. That was a real life thing. For me, when I decided one day, I was like, I'm going to be a chef. I started looking into it, figuring out who I wanted to work with, who I was going to learn under, who I wanted to be a protege for. Wrestling's really similar. When you start training, you figure out who you're going to train with, what school you want to go to, the programs you want to learn from. How did that program start for you? What was the earliest world-class Channing Thomas like?
So that man was known as Timmy Thunder. That was my original gimmick name, so to speak. And I actually like just missed a fantasy camp for one of like the more prominent schools in the area, New England. So what I did is I went on Wikipedia, and then I just like clicked on a bunch of like places and just sent a bunch of emails out. And only one company got back to me. This company called UFO Wrestling in Boston, Massachusetts, and they brought me to the Bell Time Club in Wakefield, Massachusetts, where I trained under Bo Douglas and Benny Jukes Toto Loco. So I started in June 2016 and had my first match in November 2016.
So during the training process, was there any, I don't want to say culture shock, that might not be the best way to do it, but when people kind of like dive headfirst into the wrestling business, what I've seen is people like live and breathe and die by it at first. What were some of the biggest like learning curves that you came across diving into the wrestling business? Was it the schedule? Was it the working out? Was it the bumps? What was the hardest thing for you to adjust to as you were breaking in?
I mean, the hardest thing to adjust to is probably like learning like the fundamentals and like learning what that looks like. Because everyone, when you start wrestling, you just want to do like springboards and 450s. And I'm a great athlete, so I could do those. But like the real basics were like very, very hard for me to learn, the mechanics, if you will. So yeah, like the bumping, it took me so long to learn how to bump. It's just such an unnatural thing. So yeah, probably that.
When I was doing my due diligence and flipping over the rocks and everything, I always like to find some places and look at things you've done throughout your career. And I saw early in your career, you had a chance to work with NECW a lot, Northeast Championship Wrestling. For those first few years, how important was it?
New England Championship
New
Wrestling.
England, sorry, not
Yeah.
New England Championship Wrestling.
Yeah.
How important was it for you to have some consistency when you first started to be able to work with the same guys over and over again?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Did you say NCW or NECW?
NECW.
So I only wrestled at NECW once, and that was. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm getting an alarm going off right now. I don't know what that is about.
That's weird. I just also had a 7 o'clock alarm go off for some reason.
Yeah. So NECW, New England Championship Wrestling, is a company that I only worked for once out here in Massachusetts. NCW, Northeast Championship Wrestling, is a company I worked for multiple times. So if we want to talk about Northeast Championship Wrestling, having that consistency, they ran about every 3 weeks, I'd say. Every 3 weeks or so, maybe a little more regular than some companies, running once a month or every 6 weeks. So that was good. And there was a lot of good wrestlers on there. One particular, Anthony Green, Carmelo Hayes, both of those guys kind of went through the ring there. So it was really just good to kind of have consistency, learn storylines, learn your place on the card and stuff like that. So I think that's so important, especially when you're first breaking in.
I did write down it was Northeast Championship Wrestling, NCW. I wrote down NECW for some reason because I was like, wait a second. I was like, but you're absolutely right. It's one of those weird things with some of the acronyms of the indies sometimes.
Yes. I actually worked for NECW once, and my match was so bad that they cut it early. They told us to go home early. So yeah, my time in NECW was not as good as my time at NCW. So
I think we were talking about the same thing. It's cool to get that little extra story though. Looking at the meat and potatoes now, this is where it kind of gets cool. It's very individualized based on every person. And being down here in the Southeast, we've got some of them. We'll talk about New South and stuff coming up, but in the Northeast, where you do a lot of work, you guys have it's the hotbed one between the New York, New Jersey area, Maine with Limitless, Beyond, and Mass. But you've kind of worked with a who's who up there. So we're going to start with Limitless. When it comes to the Northeast Indies, they've proved to be time and time again one of the top. You know what I mean? That's just what it is. Well, I'm going to call it what it is from my seat. They do it right. They do it consistent.
Yeah.
How is it with you though, coming in there? Because you've got to prove yourself. Hyper competitive locker room every time you go in there. AG, Alec, the people that MJF was up there at one point. Everybody who's came through that Limitless territory. How is it for you proving yourself in such a competitive territory every time you go into that locker room?
I feel like Limitless is the best wrestling promotion in New England. And I just feel like the like you said, the caliber of wrestlers that have come through Limitless is so abundant, and it's so every single time you're not only wrestling, you want to compete and you want to be the best, and you want to compete with the other guys in the locker room. Right now, you got Becca, you got Alec Price, you got ATR above the rest. Those guys, Rip Bison, Big Beef, Jordan Oliver, Lucky Ali, Joey Janela. Those guys were all on the show this past weekend. So you're competing with those guys, but you're also competing with the spirit of Limitless and the guys from the past. All the guys you see on your WWEs, your AEWs, your Carmelo Hayes, your Daniel Garcias, your MJFs. You're competing with those guys as well in a way, because that crowd, Maine wrestling was not good before Limitless. So now that Limitless is there, they kind of have seen the top of the top talent. So it's truly something special up there. So I enjoy working for Limitless a lot.
Talking about the crowds, one of my favorite things is I constantly call myself, I'm the old head. I'm the old guy on my porch screaming to get off my lawn. Yeah. I love the remnants and the skeletons of the territory days. One of my favorite things to talk about are the individual aspects of the crowd. You go to Philly, you go to the 2300, it's got a very specific crowd. You're talking about Limitless, they've got a very specific crowd.
Yeah.
Beyond, the
Yeah.
White Eagle,
Oh my God.
that
The world
venue,
famous White Eagle.
yeah, that venue has developed almost like a cult like following, especially up there. You once again, you've kind of worked for the Who's Who, going to Beyond, working the White Eagle. What's it like stepping through the curtain with how ravenous those fans can be in that building?
That's another one that just like the amount of competitors that have come through Beyond Wrestling. Um, I used to always get nervous working for Beyond Wrestling because of like it was such a destination spot in New England. Like if you're a person that wrestles in New England, you want to wrestle on Beyond Wrestling. So to me, like when I first started there, like I was just so nervous with like the rich history that it has, and I've come out of my shell for sure in the past 2 years, but like, man, it like you said, like the hallowed halls of the White Eagle are just they just ring echoes of the past, and it's a storied past. So
When you're working up that way and you go from Massachusetts to Maine and you bounce around and you work,
yeah,
with Limitless and Beyond both, do you find yourself making characteristic changes to how you work based going from territory to territory? Does Maine expect a different style of Channing Thomas than the White Eagle does, or versus coming all the way down south if you're in a Florence, Alabama? Do you feel like different fans require a different Channing Thomas, or do you feel like do you just fine tune it, or are you just constantly 10 out of 10 the same dude every time?
I feel like a few years ago, if you asked me that question, I would say almost certainly I would change it up. But now, as I've become more comfortable as world class and I've become more comfortable as myself, I feel like that I kind of have this like certain perception about myself, and I gotta like keep up that perception. Like I'm wrestling the same way I'm wrestling in Alabama, the same way I'm wrestling in Maine, the same way I'm wrestling in the White Eagle, you know? So it doesn't really, to me, at least nowadays, it doesn't really change. Maybe like one or two things might become more simple, but like the bare bones, the meat and potatoes, if you will, they're going to stay the same.
When you're on the road and you're traveling as often as you do, when you talk to the old guys from the old school way of thinking, life on the road was such a dire important part of it because you got to spend that time learning, and it's not just in-ring work but learning's the inner workings of everything. Is life on 2023 on the road, do you still get that same vibe from it when you're traveling? Do you still get that like rootness into the business that the guys used to have?
I think travel and being on the road is so important and understated, and you really can't do it enough because like like I did say, you gotta work in front of different crowds because different crowds are going to react to different things, and you're going to be put in different situations that, oh, this might work here, this might not work here. I like just, and I can't really understate how valuable like working the road is. So yeah, like yeah, it's still important. It's as important as today as it was 30 years ago, even though we don't do it as much today.
Um, Throughout, we've talked about everything you've done with Limitless and Beyond, but you've had a chance. You've gotten the call. When I did my research, I think you've done 3 shows with AEW Dark.
Yep.
Let's talk about that. When you've done and you've had such a successful career on the indies, when you get that first call, what was that call for show 1 like? When they were like, Channing, we want you to come down, we want to use you. Where were your nerves at on that first day?
Oh, just another day at the office, because this is a business, and uh, every booking is just as important as the last booking, which is just as important as the next booking. So, you know, I just try and stay as professional as possible, um, and just kind of uh, stay as professional as possible, and just come in, know the job, know the role, know what's expected, and try and just give 100% towards that. So,
When you work, this is a perspective question for you. When you work a house show and you're at, say, a White Eagle, granted, IWTV, Wrestling Open, the stuff they do there, it's a little bit different than saying a TV match for like an AEW taping. You know what I
yeah,
mean? When you're looking at like a dark taping, very different
yeah.
production quality. But for you, when you look at it, what was the biggest difference for you going from, say, a typical house show for a Limitless or anything, and then going into AEW? What was
You
the
know,
big, like, what did you think about it?
even though that you have IWTV and you're playing to both the roaming cameras on the side and you're playing to the hard cam, there's still an aspect of wanting to engage the crowd and like connect with the crowd. And maybe you still do some sort of like when you're working TV, you're never ever going to pose with your back to like the hard cam. You're always going to pose facing the hard cam so you can get that nice pearly white smile on the TV. Whereas like at the White Eagle, we're running we're running like TV light on IWTV on at Open, but you still kind of want to engage with those crowds because the louder they are, the more translates to the TV. So you're still it's a little different. You're not as worried about working cameras as much as you would say like a TV, but it's still important.
This is also one of my favorite parts because we get to kind of what you're up to today, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right now, when I was doing it, you've had a chance. Held some gold territory titles. Once again, I'm always going to reference and harp back to the old days. These territory titles in the 70s and 80s, they were as big in some cases as the world title because those were the only titles some of these people ever got to see defended because you didn't have the 10 pounds of gold coming to Florence or going, that wasn't guaranteed. So the territory titles kind of held this different prestige. Very much in independent wrestling today, territory titles still carry that.
Sure.
How did it feel the first time somebody came to you and they were like, Channing, you're going to be the guy. We're going to put the belt on you. We're going to put the strap on your back. What did it feel like for the first time somebody said, okay, you're going to be the guy. We're going to put the belt on you?
It just kind of felt fulfilling in a way because it kind of fulfills that hard work that you put in that you don't see every day. It's a very gratifying feeling to have to be trusted enough for someone to put that it's almost like a weight bearing, you know what I'm saying? Because you're gonna go on last, you're always gonna expect it to be the most entertaining part of the show, hopefully, and so you're expected to be like the most consistent performer there. So it's almost a weight you have to carry, but it's an honor to carry it, because it's just those long days in the gym, those long nights training, countless hours studying tape. It all kind of, in a way, is a sort of fulfillment that you're doing that. Like the stuff you're doing has reason, and other people are seeing it. So I would say it's very gratifying.
When you're working the shows, you share the locker room with so many people. Do you ever have that moment? Do you still get starstruck sometimes when you walk in and you see somebody like that's a Max Caster, or, that's so-and-so, or that's so like, do you still have those moments for you when you walk into it? Sometimes you're like, holy shit, this is real life. This still happens every day.
Yeah. I mean, not as much as I used to for some reason. Definitely when I was younger, for sure. Maybe not as much, but maybe I should kind of take like, I'm always kind of rushing around in my own head. So maybe I need
show
to
days are
stop
hectic as fuck, dude.
Yeah.
Like you can't help that, man.
Yeah. So maybe I do need to stop and smell the roses. I've had the opportunity to work with Max a few weeks ago and the last couple of weeks at Open. And I've known Max for a few years now. So maybe it's just different in me, but like it really is crazy. He's AEW tag team champion, but I got my personal guys. Like I kind of, I'm starstruck for. I had the opportunity to work Matt Hardy and Private Party a few times for a company called Northeast Wrestling, which is NEW. So you got your NCW, your NECW, your NEW. A lot of combinations up here. So like that's one that I kind of was starstruck for because he's kind of like he was like one of the guys that I loved watching as a kid. I think I cried when he lost a loser leaves brand match against Edge back in the day. So I still get starstruck. It's just not as much as it used to be anymore.
I feel that because I've been really lucky to have been able to talk and interview quite a few guys, and every now and then I'll sit down and I'll be like, "Holy shit, that's him!"
Yeah,
like I still get that moment every now and then.
Yeah.
So looking throughout you've had a chance. You mentioned some, your AGs, Anthony Greens. There's one guy though that I'm a big fan of. That's Alec Price, man. He's an alumni of the show. He was a great interview. He and I have kept in contact a few times. When I went through, I saw some of the work you've done in the rivalries. You and AG have worked a bunch. You and Alec have worked a bunch. When you work with these guys and you have a chance to build not just one single story in a match, but when you work somebody so often throughout your career, how is it to build that whole story throughout when you become so comfortable working with somebody that it's just like, almost guaranteed you're going to tear the house down when you get in the ring with somebody? Like, what's that comfortability level like when you get there?
I'm sorry. I was a little spacey on that question when you mentioned Alec Price. He makes my blood boil. I got a little frustrated. I guess as far as comfort, when you work with guys that you trust and you're comfortable with, you just know that you're going to go into a war with them and that you're going to leave it all out there. And as far as like that aspect, that emotion, that intense emotion that comes out of you during that, it can leave you almost like cathartic. You know what I'm saying? It's a feeling unlike any other. So
this is very much something I'm curious about, because these guys are right here in my backyard. New South Pro Wrestling.
Yes.
You're being from Northeast. How did you get hooked up with somebody so far in the deep South down here with New South Pro?
I want to say I think it was Alec. Yeah. So, because Alec went down there to work, I think a few months before we got a carload to go down and work. So, yeah, I mean, pro wrestling is all about networking. It's all about getting your foot in the door. And the best way to do that is kind of like, who do you know? And then the best way to retain it is by showing that you're not some schmuck and you actually know what you're doing. So, yeah, I think Alec Price is the one that kind of worked there first. And then, yeah, because he did Haas last year. And then I did it this year with him. So, yeah.
I love good Southern wrestling with a capital R.
Who doesn't?
The old phrase, Memphis gets over everywhere. I love good old school wrestling. And this is kind of a repeat question specifically, but having worked so much in the Northeast, when you came down south, was there that kind of a little bit of a culture shock? Because I do know the Southern fans are we can get a little hostile sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
But when you first came down here from the Northeast, did you see a huge difference initially when you came to to New South and came down here to the South?
So New South kind of has like a very progressive fan base. I was kind of shocked. I was almost expecting like slurs to be hurled at me throughout the whole time, but I didn't. So I don't know if I'm happy or disappointed because of that. But I remember when I first went down for New South by myself, I was supposed to work Brogan Finley, but it got canceled. But I was also down there for TWE in Tennessee, and they have this grandma who sits in the same exact spot right next to the entranceway, and she tries to fight every single villain wrestler. So
we were at SCI. I know exactly who you're talking about.
See? Perfect.
The anniversary show is coming up for them. They're super hyped about it.
Yep.
When you were down there, you and Big Dave worked. What's the locker room like with New South when you come down here? And to me personally, having never been to Limitless, but having seen some of the bigger guys in Memphis, New South, the locker room's very tight. Do you see a lot of the similarities in New South that you do with the successful places like your Limitless and your Beyonds when you go back up north?
Well, you know what they say. Southern hospitality is the best hospitality. And those guys, they treat you like you're one of their own. And it's truly, I mean, pro wrestling is a brotherhood in and of itself. You're always going to have people in the locker room that watch your back. But I feel like in New South, especially because I'm not shy, but like I'm kind of like standoffish in a way. So like I don't have like people kind of look at me funny sometimes, and they're like, "Is this guy an asshole? Is he not an asshole?" And I'm looking back at them at like that guy's definitely an asshole. But um, New South, like there's just so many guys down there. Like you got your Cabana Man Dans, your Donnie Janela, Primetime, Donnie Janela, your Big Dave, Dylan McQueen, Hunter Drake. Those guys, they're so kind and they're so hospitable when I'm down there. They truly make me feel like I'm at a home away from home. So I gotta say, like they treat you well down there.
This is my favorite question of any
All right,
question I ask.
let's hear it.
This one is very, very you in a sense
Okay.
that when I ask it, you're going to be like, okay, it makes sense. We're going to go back. We're going to hop in the Wayback Machine. We're going to go back to that 2016, 2017 range. Day one, match one, night one. You're going to go back and you're going to talk to Rookie Channing. You're going to look at that dude and you're going to get, 10, 15 minutes to give him advice. What advice do you give Rookie Channing today?
Oh man, that is such a tough question. I would say enjoy it more. That would probably be my my biggest piece of advice, because I'm always kind of looking for like what's next. I'm always in a headspace of like, all right, get this done and then on to the next thing. Get this done, then on to the next thing. And I would just probably advise him to kind of like stop, like breathe, like take it slow, enjoy the ride, because now that I'm older, now that I've been wrestling for like 7 years, I'm kind of like I miss the old days where there was like the biggest stress was just like, oh, like I hope I have a spot on the show. Now it's like, yeah, there's just so many different stresses as you get further along in the game, and I really wish I just enjoyed it a little bit more. Not to say that I didn't enjoy it, but enjoyed it like more when I first started, because you never really realize how fun those first couple shows are.
Just kind of stop and take it in some, right?
Yeah.
I respect that. I definitely understand it. This, however, is the part that even world-class athletes can't get out of, sir. I always into
five.
This is the random five.
Oh,
I always into them same way. Everybody gets five. Some having to do with wrestling, some not. Only one of yours does. Only one of your five.
Only one of them doesn't have to do with
Only
wrestling?
one of yours have to do with wrestling. Four that have nothing.
Let's do it.
I got your five queued up. Ready? Question number one. What's your favorite Disney movie?
Ooh, that's a great question. I love Inside Out. It was the first movie I ever cried during, so I'm gonna go with Inside Out.
See, that's 2 for 1, because another question I ask is what was the first movie to make you cry? See, bonus content, Channing. You're just giving it to me for free.
We'll say, so I'll give you a second answer. I recently watched The Iron Giant for the first time in like 15 years, and I bawled my eyes out. Yeah, so.
Big Fish, the Steven Spielberg movie with Ewan McGregor, and I don't know why it makes me cry every time I see it.
Okay, so that's the one where he's like a big liar, right?
Yeah, he's like he tells his dad's the storyteller.
Yeah, so I need to watch that. I've never seen it, but like I've been really big on like those type of movies where it's like whoa, like what's happening. So I got to watch that one. All right, great question.
Question number 2. You're on the road. We were talking about how important that could be. You're late because indie shows, sometimes we don't even leave shows till midnight, 1, 2 o'clock. You got to stop at a fast food place. Where are you stopping?
I'm going to go with McDonald's, just because the consistency McDonald's in New England, in the West Coast, wherever, you're always, what you're going to get.
A Big Mac's a Big Mac, right?
A Big Mac is a Big Mac wherever. I usually go for a double quarter pounder, hold the bun, but that's just me.
Got to watch the carbs, right?
Correct.
Question number 3. It's the only one that has to do with wrestling.
All right.
What's your favorite venue you've ever had a chance to work a show in?
Oh my God. That's a great question. There's some local ones up here that are awesome. Like the PIL Hall in Fall River, Massachusetts is a beautiful venue. It kind of looks like the ICO Pro. It always reminded me of the old ICO Pro venue. The Mahoning Drive-In in the Lehigh Valley is a movie theater. That would be cool. It's a drive-in movie theater that they do a wrestling weekend. So this year they didn't do it this year because it rained out, unfortunately, but they did it last year. But my favorite venue is probably the Mid-Hudson Civic Center, which is where they used to film old WWF, and they cut Andre the Giant's hair there. So, and that's a fun one. I wrestled Max. I rapped against Max Caster there, but I wrestled John Moxley. So,
That's
go with them.
That's a good day at work.
Yeah, it's a long day at work.
Yeah. Number 4. This one came from the fans over on TikTok.
Cool.
This is an either or question for you.
Okay.
Would you rather be gassy on a first date or on
Oh.
your wedding night?
Definitely my wedding night. Because my girlfriend already knows how gassy I can be, so I feel like she'll be expecting that. So we'll go with wedding night. It won't ruin my night. So.
And by that point, you'd think they would already know what they were in for, right?
Yeah, she definitely knows what she's in for. So we'll go with wedding.
All right, man. Question number 5.
All right.
Are there any conspiracy theories you think hold water?
Oh man, you're asking the wrong person. Because I believe in like all of them.
I'm a conspiracy theory guy, man. I always make the joke, put a tinfoil hat on. It's going to be a long night, right?
Yeah. I don't know where I want to go with this because like we could really go down some rabbit holes. I'm not like a flat earther or like something dumb. I think like the flat earth one is just kind of dumb. Like
it's almost like watching bad, trashy TV when you watch the people who try to fight the proof that flat earth is real. And you're like, I love the enthusiasm, kid. But you know, science has proven this wrong like 1,000 times, right?
So personally, I think flat earthers are kind of like a red flag. Like they're not a red flag, a false flag, since we're keeping it conspiracy theories. Jesus Christ. I think like those guys are there to discredit like the other possible conspiracy theories. I know. All right, I'll just say it. I think both parties of the United States are kind of working together. That would be my big main conspiracy theory.
Do you think any conspiracy theories hold water? Yes, the federal government.
Yes. Yeah, I mean,
that's the perfect way to put it.
Yeah, most of them you hear, I'd say most of them are probably true. You know, the world's crazy. The world's a crazy place. So
even the theory of gravity is still a theory, right? That's what I always tell people.
That's true.
All right, Channing, this is the easy part. I shut the hell up. Everybody loves it. All I need for you is plug your stuff, put yourself over, tell everybody where to find you, my man.
Oh, this is the best part of the interview. So this weekend, you can find me in Brockton, Massachusetts on Friday at the Brockton VFW for Guts and Glory Pro Wrestling Super Show. And then on Saturday, you can find me in Florence, Alabama, probably winning a ladder match, definitely cashing in for the Humongold belt at the end of the night. That's my plan. I'm going to win the ladder match and then cash in for the belt that same night. And then I'm going to melt down the Humongold belt and make a giant crown. I think that's a cool idea. And as far as social medias, across all handles, I'm at ChanThomaspro. That's Chan Thomas Pro. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and on Facebook. It's just Channing Thomas. So there we go.
Channing, it's an easy night at work when my guests can talk for me, and it's always fun, man. I love having a good conversation, and it makes it easy.
That interview flew by, I'm gonna say, honestly. Some of these times I'm always like, oh, these podcasts, it's gonna drag, and this one flew by, so hopefully it flies by for the listener.
I appreciate that, man, very, very much. And for world-class Channing Thomas, I am the Will Gray. Thanks for stopping by and listening, my people.
Yep, subscribe.